Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a great show for you. We had a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot of stuff happen this weekend and earlier today. It was not a quiet sports weekend, which, as sports fan, we love to see. We're going to start it off with the NFL. There was a bunch of breaking news, contracts being signed this morning, franchise tags being given out, retirements happening. It was a big day in the NFL today. In the second segment, there's also a little more NFL news. They have been talking about making some rule changes. The competition committee, as always, does this every single season. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the proposed rule changes, what I think about that, and what effects it might have on the future of the game. Transitioning out of the NFL in our third segment, we're going to be talking about some NBA news. LeBron James hitting 40,000 points. Insane. But we'll get a little bit into that in topic 3. And in our final segment, stick around for that, we're going to talk about some baseball. We're going to talk about the huge contract that was given out to Aaron Nola by the Phillies today. We're going to talk about some breakout stars, some youngsters, some prospects that have been really impressive in early spring training that might have earned themselves a roster spot or solidified themselves on that roster. And also some retirement news from Josh Donaldson. But before we get into it, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. Message will pop up on the screen. Stay there for a minute. We'll have a little conversation about what you put in there for everyone to see. And we appreciate anything you give, anything you can. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But let's just get right into it. Like I said, our first segment is going to be about the NFL. We're going to talk about the big news of the day. Mike Evans finally signed. He is the first major piece to be signed this season. Mike Evans, 2 years, $54 million, $35 million of it guaranteed. That is a huge contract for a guy who every single year of his career, 11 years straight, has had 1,000 yards. It doesn't matter who his quarterback is. It's just been an incredible streak by Mike Evans. He deserves to get paid, and a shorter 2-year contract there for him with the Bucs. So he's going to enter free agency again, get another little payday. It's a good contract on both sides. Obviously, as a team, the Buccaneers, you need to have this incredible wide receiver, probably a future Hall of Fame wide receiver in Mike Evans on your roster if you have any hope of repeating the success that you had last season. Obviously, him and Baker Mayfield, the connection that they had, the season that he had, especially down the stretch, he was incredible down the stretch. He was one of the top receivers in the entire league down the stretch of that season, putting up monster games, monster numbers. The Buccaneers needed to bring Mike Evans in if they wanted to continue to have the success that they had last year. Now, they did lose a lot, and there's a lot of people out there still for the Buccaneers to sign. They still obviously have to figure out the quarterback situation, dealing with Baker Mayfield. He's in a very interesting situation, and I've talked a little bit about this before. But the Buccaneers are kind of put in a situation. I hearken this back to Daniel Jones with the Giants a couple years ago, last year, I guess, when he signed that 4-year, $160 million deal. It feels very similar in the sense that you don't want to give a massive contract, a franchise-altering contract, to a guy like Daniel Jones, like Baker Mayfield, that don't have this proven track record of continued success. Baker Mayfield has had these before. Like, he did this in Cleveland. He won a playoff game in Cleveland, first time in forever, when he beat the Steelers in the wild card round a couple years ago. and Daniel Jones obviously won a playoff game and got that contract. He's done this before. He did it this year. He won another playoff game, made it to the second round. So it isn't the first time. So you feel a little more comfortable giving a guy like Baker Mayfield a contract. You feel a little more comfortable giving it to him than Daniel Jones, who just did it one time. But you still don't feel incredibly comfortable. You don't feel like he's definitely that guy. He's definitely going to be that person that we want to run our franchise for the next 5 years. The Bucs, and at least from the sense that I'm getting, they aren't set on that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of options to explore. You can definitely upgrade from Baker Mayfield, but you don't want to downgrade from him. So their hands are a little tied where they might have to give him that long contract. And I think what might be happening is a similar contract to Daniel Jones. The number that I've thrown out there, because he's going to want to get paid more than Daniel Jones, and he should, because he's better than Daniel Jones. 4 years, $170 million, and have it be a very front-loaded contract. I was looking through the cap numbers for the Bucs, and they have, including that Mike Evans contract, about $20 million in cap space this season. Now, there's a couple people that they can cut post-June 1 to save a lot of cap space. Russell Gage is probably going to be one of those cap casualties. He's going to be designated, my best guess, again, this is not reporting, but this is just looking at the numbers. He has a $10 million dead cap savings. You can save $10 million against the cap by releasing Russell Gage. And I don't think Russell Gage is that important to the Bucs that he is worth that extra $10 million on the team. So I expect him to get cut post-June 1 to make a contract work. But Baker Mayfield, my best guess, is a front-loaded contract, so you can move away from him if it doesn't work. So you can have that flexibility while also having that quarterback that has brought you success. That's what I think the Bucs will do with him and with their quarterback situation. But they have signed Mike Evans, locked him up, and I think that's huge. I think that was the single biggest move of their offseason. They still have the franchise tag that they can play. They still have a couple major free agents. We talked about Baker, but they have Antoine Winfield Jr., who just is coming off one of what should have been a Pro Bowl season. He was selected to the first team All-Pro. Antoine Winfield Jr. was as a safety. He had an incredible year, and he's most likely going to get franchise tagged. I know that's like the boogeyman in sports nowadays, in football nowadays at least, getting franchise tagged. But he most likely will get franchise tagged, and Levante David, their linebacker, I don't think he'll be in Tampa anymore. I think he'll go somewhere else. But we're looking at some more. The Bucs still have a lot to do this offseason. Obviously, it's still young. We've just finished the NFL Combine. The draft is still a ways away. The new league year officially starts 9 days from now. Mark your calendars. March 13th, the new league year officially starts. So keep an eye out for that. That's when a lot of moves are expected to start to happen, basically. There was already one announced today that will go official on March 13th, or a couple, one yesterday over the weekend. Alexander Mattison being cut from the Vikings. Does that leave the door open for them to go out and sign a guy like Saquon Barkley from the Giants? I think having Saquon on the Vikings is a really scary thought. You pair him with a quarterback, you pair him with Justin Jefferson. That's a duo on there, and Jordan Addison as well. KJ Osborne can hold his own in that offense. They get a quarterback and they bring in Saquon. I think they could. I think that would be a really fun team. But yeah, there's a. But March 13th, Russell Wilson has officially been designated to be cut. We all kind of saw this coming, but the news is official now. He is an interesting piece of this puzzle, this piece of this offseason puzzle for me. Russell Wilson is. It's one of those things that you can maybe call his time in Denver a fluke. But it's tough with how bad he was. You can blame that first year on you really can't blame it on Nathaniel Hackett. He was only there for like 6 games and he didn't play much better without him. Now he did make what I would call a drastic improvement last season. It was hard to be as bad as he was 2 seasons ago. But it still wasn't great. He still he got benched at the end of the year. Now, a lot of that might have had to do with his relationship with the team and with Sean Payton, but he is going to be gone. He is a name I expect not to command a big contract. I expect him to get kind of the veteran minimum. He's getting paid a lot of money. A lot of money. He'll clear waivers most likely and sign with whatever team wants him. Again, I keep talking about people going to the Vikings. If they can't get Kirk Cousins, I think signing Russell Wilson to a cheap deal and then getting one of those second-tier quarterbacks in the draft just to be safe, I think that would be a really nice move for them. It keeps them kind of in contention, and it'll be, if that happens, obviously, it'll be interesting to see how the public reacts to that. Because I think Russell Wilson, me personally, I think he still has a little bit left in his tank. I don't think he'll ever return to his Seattle form. I don't think he's ever going to return to, I think I should get MVP votes form. But I think he's still got some left in the tank. And pairing him with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, putting him in that offense, I think that'd be really good. There's a lot of places he could go there. There's a lot of places, a lot of teams that still need quarterbacks. But yeah, that is a little wrap up on some of the big news from the NFL today. In our next segment, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about some new rules proposed, a lot of special teams changes, a lot of stuff with the kickoffs. We're going to talk about that coming up in our second segment. Talk about what I think of those rules, if they should be moved in, what are the pros and cons of this. In our third segment, we're going to move into some basketball, talk about LeBron James hitting 40,000 points, Caitlin Clark becoming the all-time NCAA scoring leader, passing Pete Maravich, Pistol Pete, and in the fourth segment, we're going to transition into some baseball, talk about some surprises from spring training, some of those young guys that have been performing really, really well, along with some of the major news to come out of the MLB today, including a massive contract for a pitcher. So stick around. We will be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around through that break. If you are just tuning in, we just finished covering a lot of the major NFL news that came out today, including Mike Evans' huge contract to return to the Bucs, some Russell Wilson news, him officially being designated for release as of March 13th, along with just some other minor stuff that happened over the weekend and earlier today. In this second segment, we are going to be moving into some NFL rule changes. Every year, the competition committee meets to vote on rules. Each NFL team proposes a new rule, and these are some of the rules that have been rumored to have been voted on in the competition committee. We'll get into that in just a second. But before we get too far into this topic, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you are right now, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. It'll pop up on the screen there for a minute. We'll have a little talk about what you had to say. Your opinions will be broadcast across the internet, across every single platform that we are live on. And we appreciate anything you do give. Remember that link is GSMCpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to talk about proposed NFL rule changes today. And a lot of them have to do with special teams. In fact, all three of these rules that I've seen have to do with the kickoff in particular. The first one having to do with onside kicks. And this one is probably the biggest change, I would say, because one of the most magical things about the onside kick, other than how impossible it is and how the only time you really need it is when you're making an incredible, oh my goodness, we have no shot comeback. The onside kick is one of my favorite plays in sports. Whenever I see one in passing, I gotta stop and see what happens. You know, you never expect it to work, but it's electric when it does. The onside kick is one of those few plays in all of sports that, regardless of the scenario, it's going to be talked about. You could do an onside kick when you're up by 30, and it would still get talked about because what are you doing an onside kick up 30? It's one of my favorite plays in football. One of my favorite things about it. So the rules that would be changed is basically saying you have to be losing in the fourth quarter. So there would be no more of those surprise onside kicks. No more of that. No more of that. That Super Bowl Saints after the halftime onside kick that was so game changing, made it such a legendary play. You would have to announce that you are doing an onside kick, so it takes the element of surprise out of it. You would have to be trailing, and you have to be in the fourth quarter. So there's pros and cons to this rule. There really are. One of the pros of this rule, obviously, it's going to make the onside kick a little more trying to make it more successful. Another part of this rule is they would allow unbalanced formation. So it would allow 6 people on one side to get on the kicking side to go and attempt to recover the onside kick, with only 4 on the receiving side. So it would give them a slight advantage there, more bodies, obviously, making it a little bit easier. We've seen a drastic drop in onside kick percentage since they changed the run-up rules a couple years ago. A while ago now, I guess. Probably about 5 years ago at this point, they changed the run-up rules. You are even with the ball, you leave once it's kicked. So ever since then, the onside kick percentage has dwindled. So this is a way that they can attempt to make it more successful, make it happen more often, but it does come with the caveat that you have to announce it. So no more surprise onside kicks. Not that it happens too often. There were only 2 surprise onside kicks last season. In a small sample size, those surprise onside kicks obviously are more effective. I was trying to do some research on this because there isn't a surprise onside kick stat, and what I found is in 2019 to 2022, it was about 33% of the time surprise onside kicks were successful. Again, overall, it's only like 3 out of 9. So it doesn't happen all that often. But it is something that happens every once in a while. So you're getting rid of that. On the other hand, telling the other team you're going to do an onside kick, I get it. I don't really love that. That's my one hang up on this rule. The rest of this I'm all for. But you have to tell the other team that you're doing it, and restricting when you can do the onside kick is also the big negative for me. Restricting it to only being in the fourth quarter, 99% of the time, this situation that you're restricting it to is the only time that the onside kick is going to happen. But what we mentioned that incredible moment, halftime, in the Super Bowl. The Saints do an onside kick and it changes the game against the Colts. You're not going to get that anymore. You're not going to get those weird timing onside kicks. You're only going to get the traditional ones, and it's not really going to affect the game. 99% of the time, you're not going to notice. But it takes away some of those legendary moments from happening. The other rule changes that they were talking about basically adopting the XFL kickoff format, which I am a huge fan of the XFL kickoff format. Basically, you line the two teams up 5 yards apart from each other. You have one return man, 10 guys on the 35 and the 40, respectively, for each team. Kicker kicks it. Nobody is allowed to move until the ball crosses the 20-yard line. So if you move beforehand, that's going to be a false start. You have to stay put until the ball crosses the target zone, which is basically just the opponent's red zone. So the 20-yard line to the goal line, that is the target zone. So no one's allowed to move until then. It makes collisions less because it's only 5 yards of run up, and it makes it more exciting. You're still not getting these massive kickoff returns. It's still super rare to get a kickoff return touchdown, and it doesn't change it too much. We've seen this rule in action before. We've seen it be put into play in the XFL, something that I personally am a huge fan of. It's one of my favorite things from that league that I think the NFL absolutely should adopt. And then the third and final rule that I have been seeing is the change in touchbacks. And this one is the most controversial one to me, I would say. About 10 years ago, the NFL moved touchbacks from the 20 to the 25-yard line as an incentive to get more touchbacks. They wanted more touchbacks because the kickoff, frankly, is a very dangerous play. You have these guys full heads of steam running at you as fast as they can with momentum and how big these guys are. It is a very dangerous play. So they wanted to cut down on that. So they incentivized touchbacks. They incentivized receiving teams to take touchbacks. And that happened. There's been a huge uptick in touchbacks since then. But this rule is very interesting to me. I think a lot of this goes together, all three of these, because adopting one of them and not the rest doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So the way that it would work, you would have a normal touchback, a traditional touchback, one where you kick it through the end zone, kick it through the uprights, whatever. Ball is going to move not to the 30-yard line, to the 35-yard line. That is insane. Starting your drives at the 35, it makes offense so much easier than it already has been. And it's already been, offensive has this advantage right now in the NFL, and that changes all the time. It's the ebb and flow of sports. Defenses get better, offenses get worse. You get into a defensive era, and then the offense responds. You get back into an offensive era, and right now we are in an offensive era of football, and it's a great time to watch. It's fun. It's exciting. But giving the offense already a a bigger advantage than they already have. You start to really chip away at making it fair. And the amount of touchbacks that we talked about this, the amount of touchbacks that we've seen in the NFL, making it go to the 35-yard line just frankly seems not okay. That seems like a huge advantage. Now, the one part of this that makes this really interesting to me is that if it's not an end zone touchback, if it lands after that 20-yard line and rolls into the end zone, instead of getting it at the 25, the offense would get it at the 20-yard line, the traditional touchback spot where it was before. And that kind of makes a kickoff a skill game. You're not booting it as far as you can to avoid a return. You have to target practice, really. You have to get more specialized with your kickoffs, and I think that could make it really interesting. Although penalizing it to the 35 for an end zone touchback seems a little harsh to me. I would have maybe made it the 30 at most. The 35 is crazy, quite honestly. But yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think here of these new NFL rules. Again, that new touchback rule, 35 or 20, the XFL kickoff being adopted, and the new onside kick rules, only in the fourth quarter, only when you're losing and you have to tell the other team, but it does allow that unbalanced formation. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of these kickoff rules, what you would like to see adopted. If you like the way the rules are, if you'd like to see any changes, let me know in the comments here. But in our next segment, we are going to transition out of the NFL. We are going to move into some basketball talk. LeBron James hit 40,000 career points. Caitlin Clark became the NCAA all-time leading scorer. So we are going to talk a little bit about scoring in basketball, some records that are still there to be broken. You might think there's none to be broken for LeBron James in scoring, but there's still one standing. So stick around on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sitting through that break with me. If you are just tuning in, we have covered NFL in our first two segments. Our first segment was talking about the breaking news of the day with Mike Evans signing that massive contract, what that means for the Buccaneers and for Baker Mayfield, as well as Russell Wilson getting released from the Broncos. In our second segment, you just missed, we talked about the new NFL rules being proposed, what I thought of them, and a breakdown of what that would entail. Coming up in this segment, we're going to talk a little NBA. LeBron James hit 40,000 points. 40,000 points. Caitlin Clark passed Pistol Pete Maravich for the most points ever scored in college, not just women's, but men's as well. And we'll talk about a record for points that LeBron James still can break. But before we get too far into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are right now, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. That link will take you to a tip and donation site. You can leave a message with it. It'll come across the screen right there in the bottom third. We'll have your post up there, have a little discussion about what you have to say, not just for your YouTube or Twitch chat to see, but for everyone but for everyone across all platforms to see as well. Again, that link is GSMCpodcast.net. We appreciate you guys for watching and anything you can give. But like I said, we are going to move into some NBA right now. Talking about LeBron James. Obviously, that was the big news of the weekend. LeBron James hit 40,000 career regular season points. He already held the record. He passed Kareem last year. He's the first player ever, obviously, being the record holder previously, to hit 40,000 points. Not only that, but he's obviously the fastest to hit 40,000, but he's the fastest to hit 1,000 points. He's the fastest to hit 2,000 points. He's the fastest to hit 3,000 points, all the way up to 40,000 points. LeBron James has had the fastest career 1,000 mark, every single 1,000 mark. LeBron James has been the fastest. He is the undisputed scoring champion in the NBA. But he's not the undisputed scoring champion across all of basketball. And you might be saying, Jeremy, what could you possibly be talking about? No one has scored 40,000 points. That's where you would be wrong. Because Brazilian basketball player Oscar Schmidt might never have heard of him. He was drafted into the NBA. He never played in the NBA, though. He was drafted by the Nets in the 6th round of the 1984 draft, 131 overall. This man played basketball for 30 years in Brazilian leagues. He has the total points record across all professional basketball. 49,000. He's over 50,000. LeBron James is at 49,000. He needs 4,000 more points to catch up and pass Mr. Schmidt here. So a little thing to look out for. He's going to pass him. But a fun little fact that I saw when I was researching this episode, Oscar Schmidt there, Brazilian basketball legend, all-time point scorer leader ever. But no, LeBron James hitting 40,000 points is incredible. You talk about not getting into the GOAT debate here because that's something for another day. But regardless of who you think is better between him and Jordan, regardless of if 40,000 makes him the greatest player of all time, it's his longevity. How he's been playing this game for 20 years. And 20 years later, he's still dominating the sport. He is still top 10 player in the league today. LeBron James is at the age of 39. It is insane the longevity that he has, and it's not just any kind of longevity. It's not like the Vince Carter kind of longevity that, put him... We all love Vince Carter. He wasn't the same Vince Carter from the Raptors that he was when he was playing on Atlanta when he was 40 years old. He was not the same athlete. LeBron James being able to do what he's been doing for as long as he's been doing it really is insane. You never see this kind of longevity in sports. The closest thing to this is Tom Brady, and he's won 7 championships in the NFL. He never really fell off that cliff. He retired at the top of the game. He set records for most passing yards in a season, most completions in his last season. He was still incredible. And LeBron James is at that level. It's so, so rare to see a guy do what he's been doing for as long as he's been doing it. It's so incredible to watch a guy play elite basketball well into his 30s. He's going to hit 40. He's shown no signs of slowing down. And eventually it'll happen. We've seen it. I hate to keep taking it out of the NBA, but Alex Ovechkin in the NHL also He is chasing the most goals record right now. He's about 40 away or so. And he'll do that before his career ends, because that's what his career is now, chasing that record. But he was putting up 50 goals seasons every single year. Until this year, he's kind of hit a wall. And it came out of nowhere. That's what time does. It comes out of nowhere and it gets you. But LeBron James has no signs of slowing down. There's no real signs of decline, and it's crazy to watch. Now, a lot of that has to do with how much money he spends to keep himself like this, to keep himself ready to play a game that's really physically demanding. But it's just incredible to watch. So congratulations, LeBron James, on hitting 40,000 career points. If you see this, we'll create a Sports by GSMC Podcast Network little trophy for you. I'll send something in the mail. Just shoot me a message. 40,000 points. I'll send you something. Me personally. But outside of LeBron James, we had more scoring records fall. Pistol Pete Maravich, one of college basketball's best scorer. He has held the record for most points scored in a collegiate career for almost 50 years at this point. Caitlin Clark, who is incredible at basketball. Caitlin Clark, who is so much fun to watch, passed Pete Maravich over the weekend for most points scored in a collegiate career. So that 50-year-old record has fallen. And before we get into this, I want to give Caitlin Clark her flowers. She's an incredible basketball player. She is going to change the WNBA when she goes next season. She announced that she is going. I'm not sure if we talked about that on here. But she announced that she is going to the WNBA. She's going to change the WNBA. She's going to get so many more eyes onto the WNBA. It's a league that's already been growing really steadily. But getting a megastar, a superstar like Caitlin Clark into that league is going to be so good for them. I'm very excited to see where she can take that league. You know, every league needs that star. Every league needs that person that is going to bring them into the next level. Because you can have an entertaining product as a sport, but if you don't have that superstar, that player that everyone kind of gravitates to when they watch, it's not going to reach that next level. And Caitlin Clark has that gravity. She has that ability to bring people in, and it's really impressive. But then there's the debate that I've been seeing a lot since she passed Pistol Pete. Just because she has the most points, does that make her the greatest scorer of all time in college basketball? And I understand both sides of this argument. I really do. I understand. Just look at the numbers. She's got more points. She's the greatest scorer. And Caitlin Clark is incredible at scoring. But what Pete Maravich did, what Pistol Pete did, astounds me still to this. It still astounds me. You go back and you look at the numbers. Not only did he score 45 points a game, not only did he hold this record for 50 years, not only did he do it in a time, not only did he do it in just 3 seasons, but he did it when there were no three-pointers. He was averaging 45 points a game, points a night, without that three-point line. That is crazy. He made 24 buckets a game. Now, obviously, there are free throws, but he made 24 buckets a night. That is an incredible stat line. And he obviously is an NBA Hall of Famer. He went on to have an incredible career. As awesome as Caitlin Clark is, I still don't think she passes Pistol Pete. as far as the greatest collegiate point scorer of all time. It's going to be really tough to pass that. There's a lot of caveats there, like we just went through. 3 years and no 3-point line. Now, obviously, times were different. You can make that comparison as well. But unlimited range was not something that was happening back then. So I still think he's the greatest scorer in college basketball. Not to throw any ill will towards Caitlin Clark and what she's doing, because it's awesome. She got her name on the court that she's still playing on. You know, most people only get that posthumously after they died. She has it while she is still playing on that court. That is, if that doesn't tell you how awesome of a basketball player that she is, I really don't know what else will. But no, in our next segment coming up, we are going to transition into some baseball, and there was just some breaking news in hockey that we will cover in that segment as well. But yeah, thank you everybody so much for watching. We are going to take a break here, and we will be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in for the first time, you've missed a great show. We started it off with with the massive NFL news of the day, including Mike Evans signing that huge contract with the Bucs and Russell Wilson officially being designated for release. We talked a little bit about that. In our second segment, we went over the NFL proposed rule changes, specifically all about the kickoffs, onside kicks, and formations with that. In our last segment, we just went over the NBA with LeBron James breaking 40,000 points, Caitlin Clark versus Pete Maravich in the collegiate point scoring ranks. In this segment, we are going to talk about some of the big baseball news of the day. Aaron Nola signed a huge contract. How big of a contract? The biggest contract by average annual value, AAV. We'll talk about that in just a second, as well as Josh Donaldson's retirement and some huge and some rookies, or I guess prospects, that have really stood out in spring training so far. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. It'll pop up on our screen here, not just for you, but for everyone to see. We'll have a little conversation about that. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. We appreciate anything you give, and we appreciate you guys sticking around and watching. But like I was saying, we are transitioning into baseball here, and the big news of the day in the MLB is Aaron Nola and his massive contract with the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies and Aaron Nola came to terms on a 3-year, $129 million deal. Now, for those who are unaware how contract works in baseball, because there's different rules with contracts in different sports, baseball contracts are fully guaranteed. Every single one of them fully guaranteed. So Aaron Nola gets $43 million a year for the next 3 years. That is a massive number. Not only that, that's the biggest number for a single year, the biggest AAV, average annual value, for a contract in MLB history. And you might look at me and say, didn't Shohei Ohtani sign a $700 million deal this offseason? And yes, he did. That might be the biggest contract ever. But by average annual value, he famously is only making $2 million a year here. So super backloaded on him. He's going to make like $690 million one season, which I can't imagine waking up and getting $690 million in my bank account. I don't know what I would do. But Aaron Nola is coming back to the Phillies. He's a little bit older, but the Phillies, who have made a couple deep playoff runs here back to back, he's a very important piece to that puzzle. That the top of that pitching staff, Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, are the two-headed monster that has really pushed them through the playoffs as far as they've gotten these past 2 seasons. Obviously making it to the World Series 2 years ago and making it to the NLCS last year. Those two guys have really been the driving force, along with their batting, obviously, their home run hitters. Those two have really been the driving force, pushing this Philadelphia Phillies team to through the postseason, not just to the postseason. They've been incredible. They are both getting huge contracts. I think the Phillies would have taken a massive step back if they weren't able to get this done with him. So getting that done, $43 million is a huge number a year. But for how important he is to that team, I'd say it's probably worth it. They only have this contending window for some time, for as long as they do, and when you're in that window, you got to spend, especially when you're competing against teams like the Braves and like the Dodgers. Braves in your own division. It's tough in that NL. It really is. You have to have a super team. But outside of Aaron Nola and the Phillies making that huge contract, we had a retirement in the MLB. Josh Donaldson, third baseman who played for 7 teams in the MLB. He went around. He played for the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Twins, a couple other teams that I don't have off the top of my head. Josh Donaldson here, he won he's an MVP winner. 2015, he won the AL MVP. He's been to 3 All-Star games. He's won 2 Silver Sluggers. He's had a really, really incredible career. Now, Hall of Fame worthy, that's an interesting debate, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We'll talk about that when he enters the ballot in about 5 years. Josh Donaldson had a really, really incredible MLB career. Congratulations to him on hanging it up, and I hope he enjoys retirement here. Other breaking news out of the MLB. Scott Boras, the client of the major pitchers and the 2 sluggers that took a long time to get signed, Scott Boras, he came out and he said that there is a pitching crisis. He said that 4 teams have reached out to him about 4 new teams, not just teams that they're having conversations with. 4 new teams have reached out and are having conversations about Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery. And you have to take this with a grain of salt because he is their agent and he's trying to get them the most money with what limited leverage he has left. We've seen these money values of Cody Bellinger and of Matt Chapman both go down from what they were expected to sign for or what they were asking for at the beginning of free agency. You've seen a lot of that go down since then. So it's you can take that with a grain of salt. It's coming from the man himself. He might be trying to drive up competition, drive up that number. But it is really interesting that none of those guys have signed yet. We've talked ad nauseum about those two and how it's surprising that they haven't been signed, especially this late into spring training. We are like opening days in April. We're less than a month away from opening day. We are almost halfway through spring training at this point, and both of those guys don't have teams. It's a little bit concerning, and I'd expect them to sign in the next week, honestly. If they're not on a roster, because a lot of these rosters are getting solidified. You know, you never know what's going to happen with injuries, obviously. You knock on wood that that's not going to happen. But a lot of these rosters are starting to get solidified. A lot of these young guys are starting to solidify their spot in the roster. Some young guys like James Wood on the Nationals. He outfielder there. He's been getting power comparisons to some of the greatest power hitters in the league right now. Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton. He's been incredible. He's looked unstoppable in spring training. Now the Nationals are in a spot where he might not get called up. But then you have a guy like Cole Reagans, pitcher with the Royals. We talked a little bit about him when we did the Royals offseason breakdown a couple days ago. There are comparisons. He's being called the left-handed Jacob deGrom. And then Chase DeLauter, the outfielder from the Cleveland Guardians, out of James Madison University, he might be solidifying a spot for him in right field right now. There's a lot of people, a lot of teams that are making these big roster decisions, and these pitchers, I mean, there still is a month left, so there's still time, but it's getting to the point where it's more of a detriment to them to not be on a team than it is for them to be in free agency. So I'm curious what you guys think about that. I did promise there was some NHL breaking news, so before we get out of here, the New Jersey Devils have fired their head coach. This came just about 10 minutes ago while we were on break, but I wanted to get this out there, that breaking news, the New Jersey Devils have fired their head coach. They expect Travis Green to be their interim head coach for the rest of the season. The Devils, who have had a really, honestly, disappointing season. They came out of the gates last year. They were one of the best teams in the league. They won a playoff series, maybe two. Again, I don't remember. I don't have the bracket in front of me. I wasn't prepared to talk hockey right now. But they've had a really disappointing season. Their defense and goaltending hasn't been the same. They've been a little injured this year, so that's not an excuse for them. But their team kind of just, everyone took a big step backwards. The Devils were on the doorstep of being a contending team last year, and we thought they were close. We thought they might get there, but they just took a big step back. So keep an eye out on that. The trade deadline for the NHL is still around the corner. There's a lot going on in sports, so keep an eye out on those pitchers to be signed. Keep an eye out on spring training. The NFL offseason is about to pick up. We didn't even cover L'Jarius Sneed, who's been franchise tagged. But yeah, thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back tomorrow with another great show. You guys have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.